Archangel Michael says, God sent this message just for you. Not for the person scrolling before you, not for the person who will scroll after. For you, specifically, right now, in this exact moment of your life. Stop. Do not keep scrolling past this one. Something in you already knows it's different. You have been asking, quietly, whether anyone or anything is actually paying attention to what you're going through. Today, the answer arrives clearly. You are seen. You are known. And you are being spoken to directly, right now, through these exact words. Archangel Michael says, this message carries both a warning and an encouragement, and you need both equally today. Do not skip past the warning to get to the comfort. It was placed first for a reason. Here is the warning. You have been ignoring a specific feeling in your gut for weeks now, telling yourself it's simply anxiety, simply overthinking, simply nothing worth taking seriously. That feeling is not nothing. It is information, and it deserves your attention before you make whatever decision it has been quietly warning you about. Think about what situation, person, or choice that feeling has been pointing toward. Not vaguely. Specifically. Name it clearly in your mind right now, even if naming it feels uncomfortable or inconvenient given everything else currently happening in your life. Archangel Michael says, God did not give you intuition so that you would override it every time it became inconvenient. Consider honoring that feeling today, at least enough to pause and examine it honestly before moving forward with whatever it has been cautioning you against. Here is the encouragement that follows this warning. Whatever you have survived to reach this exact point in your life was not survived by accident. You were carried through it, even during the stretches you felt entirely alone, even during the nights you doubted you would make it to morning still standing. You made it. That matters more than you have allowed yourself to fully acknowledge. Think about the specific difficulty that felt most impossible to survive, and notice, honestly, that you did survive it. Not perfectly. Not without scars. But you are here, reading this message, which means you made it through something that once felt like it might actually end you. Archangel Michael says, that survival was not luck. It was support you could not always see, working on your behalf even in your darkest moments. Trust that same support continues now, in whatever difficulty you are currently facing. Here is a second warning, distinct from the first. Watch closely for people who claim to speak for God while asking you for money, obedience, or unquestioning loyalty in return for blessings they promise but cannot actually deliver. Genuine guidance never requires payment to be received, and genuine faith never requires you to silence your own good judgment in favor of someone else's demands. Consider whether anyone in your life currently claims special spiritual authority over you while also asking for financial sacrifice, unquestioning obedience, or isolation from people who love you. If so, treat that claim with serious skepticism, regardless of how convincingly or urgently it is presented. Archangel Michael says, real guidance strengthens your own discernment. It does not ask you to abandon it. Anyone asking you to override your own good judgment entirely, in the name of faith or spiritual authority, deserves far more scrutiny than blind trust. Here is the encouragement that follows. You already possess good judgment, sharpened through everything you have already lived through. Trust it. You do not need someone else's permission to think clearly, to ask questions, to require honesty before you offer your trust, your time, or your resources. Think about a time recently when your own judgment served you well, protecting you from a decision that would have cost you significantly if you had ignored what you clearly sensed at the time. Consider that same judgment, still present, still reliable, ready to serve you again in whatever decision currently sits in front of you. Archangel Michael says, here is a third warning. Do not let urgency manufactured by someone else pressure you into a decision before you have had adequate time to think it through clearly. Genuine opportunities can typically withstand reasonable scrutiny and reasonable time. Anything that only works if you decide immediately, without space to reflect, deserves more caution rather than less. Consider whether any current decision in front of you has arrived wrapped in artificial urgency, pressure to act now before you've had proper time to consider it. Slow down deliberately, even if that risks losing whatever is being offered. A genuine opportunity rarely disappears simply because you took reasonable time to think it through. Archangel Michael says, here is the encouragement that pairs with this warning. Patience is not weakness, and slowing down is not the same as missing your moment. What is genuinely meant for you will still be available once you have had time to think clearly, and what disappears the moment you ask for time to consider it was likely never as solid as it first appeared. If this message reached you today, believe that its timing was intentional, carrying exactly the mixture of warning and encouragement you needed to receive. Comment below if either warning named something currently present in your own life. Share this message with someone who needs both this caution and this comfort today. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There is more still to say, because a message this important rarely fits into something this short. Archangel Michael says, here is a fourth warning. Be careful of the specific voice in your own mind that convinces you settling for less is simply wisdom, simply maturity, simply being reasonable about what's actually available to you. That voice is not always wrong. But it deserves scrutiny before you accept its conclusions automatically, without examining whether it is protecting you or simply limiting you out of old fear. Think about a specific hope you have quietly downgraded recently, telling yourself it was unrealistic, that you were asking for too much, that you should simply be grateful for what's already available rather than continuing to want something more. Consider, honestly, whether that downgrade was genuine wisdom or simply fear wearing wisdom's clothing. Here is the encouragement that follows. You are allowed to want more than what has felt available to you so far. Wanting more is not ingratitude for what you already have. It is simply honesty about a direction your life is still capable of moving in, if you remain willing to pursue it rather than settling prematurely out of exhaustion or fear. Archangel Michael says, God's plans for you were never meant to be smaller than what you are quietly hoping for. Consider that your hope, however large it currently feels, may actually be closer to the plan than the smaller, safer version you have been settling for out of fear of disappointment. Here is a fifth warning. Watch for relationships that consistently require you to shrink yourself, apologize for your own needs, or manage someone else's emotions at the constant expense of your own peace. Notice where this pattern has been happening most in your life recently, and consider what it would take to interrupt it, starting today. Consider a specific relationship where you have been saying yes more out of fear of disappointing someone than out of genuine desire to say yes. That pattern, repeated enough times, quietly erodes something important in you. Notice it honestly, without immediately deciding what to do about it yet. Archangel Michael says, here is the encouragement that follows. You are allowed to disappoint people in service of protecting your own well-being. That is not selfishness. That is simply the ordinary maintenance a person requires in order to keep showing up fully for the relationships and responsibilities that genuinely matter most in their life. Here is a sixth warning, concerning how you speak to yourself when no one else is listening. Notice the specific language you use internally when you make a mistake, when things don't go as planned, when you fall short of your own expectations. If that internal language has become harsh, critical, or contemptuous, understand that this pattern causes more lasting damage than almost any external difficulty you might face. Consider what you would say to a close friend who made the exact mistake you are currently criticizing yourself for. Notice the gap between that compassionate response and whatever harsher response you have been offering yourself instead. Consider closing that gap today, deliberately choosing gentler language even when it feels unfamiliar or somehow undeserved. Archangel Michael says, here is the encouragement that follows this warning. You deserve the same compassion you would offer someone else facing an identical struggle. God's mercy toward you has never been conditional on your own perfect performance. Consider extending that same unconditional mercy toward yourself, starting today. Here is a seventh warning, concerning the company you keep and the content you consume regularly. Notice how you feel after spending time with certain people, or after consuming certain kinds of media or conversation. If a consistent pattern leaves you feeling more anxious, more cynical, or more diminished afterward, that pattern deserves serious reconsideration, regardless of how normal it has come to feel in your daily life. Consider what specific relationship or habit has been quietly draining you lately, more than you have fully acknowledged until reading this message today. Consider what a deliberate reduction in that specific exposure might do for your overall well-being over the coming weeks and months ahead. Archangel Michael says, here is the encouragement that follows. You have more control over your own environment than you may currently believe. Small, deliberate changes to who and what you allow regular access to your attention can produce significant shifts in your overall outlook over time, more than most people initially expect from changes that seem, on the surface, relatively minor. If this message reached you today, believe that every warning and every encouragement shared here arrived exactly when you needed them both. Comment below which specific warning or encouragement resonated most with your own current situation. Share this message with someone who needs both caution and comfort today. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There is a deeper layer to this message still waiting to be revealed, one that concerns the specific season you are entering right now, whether you have fully recognized it yet or not. Archangel Michael says, here is an eighth warning. Watch for the specific belief that you must have everything figured out before you are allowed to begin something new. This belief, common as it is, quietly prevents countless people from ever starting things that would have genuinely benefited them, simply because complete clarity never actually arrives before action, only through it. Consider what you have been postponing, waiting for a level of certainty or preparation that realistically was never going to arrive in advance. Consider what a smaller, more modest first step might look like, one that does not require complete certainty, simply a willingness to begin imperfectly and adjust as you go. Here is the encouragement that follows. God does not wait for your perfection before working through you. Every person's significant faith has ever recorded began their calling while still imperfect, still uncertain, still learning as they went. Your imperfection is not disqualifying. Consider it simply the ordinary condition every person begins from before genuine growth actually starts. Archangel Michael says, here is a ninth warning, concerning how you measure your own worth. Notice whether you have been basing your sense of value primarily on external achievement, external validation, or external comparison to other people's progress. This measurement, while common, tends to produce a worth that feels perpetually unstable, dependent on circumstances outside your control rather than something more solid and internally grounded. Consider what it would mean to root your sense of worth in something more stable, your effort, your integrity, your consistent care for the people around you, rather than in outcomes only partially within your control. This shift, while difficult, tends to produce far more stable confidence over the long run than worth measured primarily through comparison and external validation. Here is the encouragement that follows. You are worth more than your most recent achievement or your most recent setback. That worth does not fluctuate the way your circumstances do, even though it can certainly feel that way during difficult stretches. God's view of your worth has never wavered, regardless of how much your own view of it has fluctuated over time. Archangel Michael says, "Here is a 10th warning, concerning patience with your own healing process, whatever specific healing you are currently in the middle of." Notice if you have been comparing your pace to some external timeline, either one suggested by other people or one you have simply assumed without much reflection. Healing rarely follows a fixed, predictable schedule, and comparing your own pace to an artificial standard tends to produce unnecessary frustration. Consider releasing any specific timeline you have imposed on your own healing, replacing it with simple patience for whatever pace your particular process actually requires. This release does not mean abandoning effort or accountability. It simply means removing an artificial pressure that has likely been making an already difficult process even harder than it needs to be. Here is the encouragement that follows this warning. God's timing has never matched human impatience, and that mismatch has never meant God was absent or uninterested. Consider that the same patience being asked of you now has been extended toward you consistently, even during the seasons you felt most forgotten or overlooked. Archangel Michael says, "Here is an 11th warning, concerning how much of your attention has been consumed by worry about things genuinely outside your control." Consider what percentage of your recent worry has been directed toward situations you can actually influence, compared to situations you can only observe and hope for, without any real power to change their outcome directly. Think about a specific worry that has been occupying significant mental energy recently, and honestly assess whether it falls into the category of things you can actually act on, or the category of things you can only release and trust to unfold as they will. If it falls into the second category, consider what it would mean to actually practice releasing it today. Here is the encouragement that follows. Releasing worry over things outside your control is not the same as not caring about the outcome. It simply means directing your limited energy toward what you can actually influence, trusting the rest to unfold according to a timing and a plan larger than what you alone could arrange through worry or force of will. Archangel Michael says, "Here is a 12th warning, concerning generosity toward yourself specifically in moments of genuine limitation." Notice if you have been pushing yourself to meet standards that would be unreasonable to expect from anyone facing your exact current circumstances, essentially demanding more of yourself than you would ever demand of someone else in a similar situation. Consider what reasonable expectations would actually look like for you right now, given your current circumstances honestly assessed, rather than an idealized version of what you believe you should be capable of regardless of context. Here is the final encouragement of this section. You are allowed to be exactly as capable as your current circumstances genuinely allow, without additional guilt for not exceeding those reasonable limitations. God's expectations of you have always accounted for your actual circumstances, not some idealized version disconnected from your genuine, current limitations. If this message reached you today, trust that each specific warning and each specific encouragement arrived precisely when you needed to hear them. Comment below which one resonated most strongly with your own current situation. Share this message with someone who may need one or more of these specific reminders before continuing forward with decisions currently in front of them. Thank you for staying with this message until this point. There is a final set of warnings and encouragements before this message closes completely, and they concern the future rather than the present, preparing you for what lies ahead rather than only addressing what is currently unfolding in your life. Archangel Michael says, here is a warning about success, specifically about how you will handle it once it arrives, because it is arriving, sooner than the current difficulty may suggest. Consider what patterns might resurface once pressure eases and things begin going well. Some people, once relief finally arrives after a difficult stretch, quietly abandon the practices and boundaries that helped them survive the difficulty in the first place. Consider what specific practice, built during difficulty, you want to consciously maintain even once things become easier, rather than assuming it was only necessary during hardship. Here is the encouragement that follows. The strength and wisdom you have built through this season are permanent gifts, not temporary tools meant only for crisis. Carry them forward deliberately into whatever ease follows this current difficulty. Archangel Michael says, here is a warning about comparison, one that will likely resurface once you begin experiencing genuine progress. As things improve, you may find yourself comparing your specific pace or specific outcomes to other people who appear to be progressing faster or achieving more. This comparison, even during improvement, can quietly undermine the genuine satisfaction you would otherwise experience from your own real progress. Consider committing, in advance, to measuring your progress against your own starting point rather than against other people's current position. Here is the encouragement that follows. Your specific path was shaped by your specific God-given purpose, distinct from anyone else's, and comparing the two has never once accurately reflected how well you are actually doing on the path meant specifically for you. Archangel Michael says, here is a warning about relationships, specifically about who you allow closest to you as your circumstances continue to improve. Success and improved circumstances sometimes attract people whose interest is more connected to what you now have or what you can offer them, rather than genuine care for who you actually are as a person. Consider what specific criteria you will use to evaluate new relationships going forward, distinguishing genuine connection from interest that is primarily transactional or opportunistic. Here is the encouragement that follows. The people genuinely meant to walk alongside you through what's coming will love you regardless of circumstance, exactly as they already have through everything you have already survived together. Archangel Michael says, here is a final warning, perhaps the most important of the entire message. Do not let fear of these potential future pitfalls prevent you from actually pursuing and enjoying the improvement that is genuinely coming. These warnings are meant to prepare you, not to make you anxious about success before it has even arrived. Here is the final encouragement, the one meant to carry you forward from this exact moment into everything still ahead. You are being prepared, carefully and deliberately, by a guidance that has never once abandoned you, even during the seasons you felt most alone. Trust that preparation. Trust the warnings, and trust the encouragement, both offered together today because you genuinely needed both. If this message reached you today, believe that every warning and every encouragement shared here arrived precisely when you needed to hear them, preparing you both for present decisions and future circumstances. Comment below which combination of warning and encouragement felt most relevant to your current situation. Share this message with someone who could benefit from this same combination of caution and comfort. Thank you for staying with this message until its very last word. Stay alert. Stay hopeful. And trust that you are being prepared, carefully and deliberately, for everything still ahead. Before this message truly ends, there is one more practical layer worth adding, a way of actually applying everything shared so far rather than simply reading through it once and moving on unchanged. Archangel Michael says, consider choosing just one warning and one encouragement from everything shared today, the ones that felt most immediately relevant to your current situation, and commit to actually addressing them this week, concretely, rather than trying to apply everything at once and likely accomplishing none of it well. Real change tends to happen through focused, sustained attention on one thing at a time. Think about which specific warning and which specific encouragement stood out most clearly as you read through this message. Not the ones that seem most impressive or most spiritually significant, simply the ones that felt most immediately true about your actual current circumstances. Choose them, and consider what a concrete first step toward addressing them would look like, specific enough that you could actually begin today. Archangel Michael says, write both down, the warning and the encouragement, somewhere you will actually see them again tomorrow. Consider setting a reminder for 1 week from today, specifically to check whether you have actually taken that first step, or whether it has quietly slipped away amid the ordinary business of daily life. Consider who might hold you accountable to this specific commitment, someone you trust enough to share both what resonated and the step you're planning to take in response to it. Accountability, chosen deliberately, significantly increases the likelihood that today's insight actually translates into real, lasting change rather than remaining simply an interesting idea you read about once. Archangel Michael says, real transformation happens through this kind of specific, sustained follow-through, far more reliably than through simply consuming more spiritual content without ever actually implementing what any of it suggests. Consider today as the beginning of actual change, rather than simply another message read and then set aside without concrete follow-up. Think about what your life might look like in 3 months if you genuinely addressed the specific warning and lived out the specific encouragement that resonated most today, applied consistently rather than only considered briefly and then forgotten. That future version of your life is available to you, built specifically through the follow-through this message is asking you to actually commit to today. Archangel Michael says, you are capable of this follow-through. Everything you have already survived is evidence of a persistence and capability more substantial than any temporary lapse in follow-through might suggest. Trust that capability, and apply it now, specifically, to what felt most true as you read through everything shared in this message. If this message reached you today, believe it arrived carrying everything you genuinely needed, both the awareness these warnings and encouragements provide and the practical structure for actually implementing meaningful change based on them. Comment below which single warning and encouragement you are choosing to focus on this week. Share this message with someone who might benefit from both today's message and this practical approach to actually applying it. Thank you, sincerely, for staying with this message until this final section. Stay alert. Stay hopeful. Choose one thing. And begin today. Before you close this message, take one final moment to reflect on everything shared here today, not to feel overwhelmed by the number of warnings and encouragements, but to notice how many of them were already, in some quiet way, things you already suspected about your own life before reading them today. Archangel Michael says, that recognition matters. These warnings and encouragements were never meant to introduce entirely foreign concerns you had never previously considered. They were meant to name, clearly and directly, what a quieter part of you had already been sensing, giving you permission and clarity to finally act on intuitions you may have been dismissing or minimizing until now. Consider what it means that so much of this message felt familiar rather than surprising, confirmation rather than revelation. Trust your own intuition more going forward, understanding that it has likely been more accurate and more perceptive than you have generally given it credit for. Archangel Michael says, here is a final reflection before this message closes completely. Warnings, taken seriously and acted upon, are ultimately acts of self-respect, not sources of anxiety or fear. Encouragements, received fully rather than deflected, are ultimately acts of trust in a plan larger than what you alone could have arranged. Choosing to protect your time, your energy, your boundaries, and your well-being, while also trusting the good that is genuinely coming, is not contradictory. It is simply wisdom, applied in both directions simultaneously. Consider adopting this framing going forward, understanding vigilance and hope not as opposites, but as partners, chosen consistently rather than only during moments of acute crisis or difficulty. Archangel Michael says, "You deserve both," applied consistently, not only during moments when circumstances force you to finally pay attention. Consider what it would mean to extend this same quality of caution and hope to yourself proactively, rather than only reactively once difficulty has already made it unavoidable. If this message reached you today, trust that everything shared here, every warning and every encouragement, arrived exactly when you were ready to hear and genuinely apply them. Thank you for staying with this message until its true final word, and for taking seriously something that was written specifically to protect and encourage you. Stay alert. Stay hopeful. Protect what matters. And walk forward, equipped and ready for everything ahead. Archangel Michael says, one last thought before you go. Consider what it would look like to revisit this message periodically, not just today, but perhaps once a month for the next several months, checking in with yourself about whether these warnings still apply, whether new ones have emerged, whether the encouragement you chose to focus on today has genuinely become a sustained practice rather than a brief, temporary adjustment. Consider setting a recurring reminder for this kind of periodic check-in, treating your own well-being and discernment as something that deserves ongoing, deliberate attention rather than a single moment of insight that fades naturally once daily life resumes its ordinary pace and demands. Archangel Michael says, growth of this kind rarely happens through a single dramatic moment of realization. It happens through this kind of sustained, periodic attention, returning again and again to check whether you are actually living according to what you have already come to understand. Think about what would genuinely help you sustain this kind of ongoing attention, given your specific personality and circumstances. Some people benefit from written journaling. Others benefit from regular conversation with a trusted friend. Others benefit from simple, quiet reflection built into an existing routine. Consider which approach fits you best, and consider committing to it starting this week. Archangel Michael says, you have everything you need to sustain this kind of ongoing growth, built through everything you have already survived and everything this message has offered you today. Trust that capability, and apply it consistently, not only today but in the weeks and months that follow. If this message reached you today, believe that it offered you both immediate insight and a sustainable path toward continuing to apply that insight well beyond today alone. Thank you, genuinely, for staying with this message until its very last word. God says, this message is now complete. Everything you needed has been offered, both the warnings themselves and the encouragement that carries you forward through them. Carry it well. Stay alert. Stay grounded. Keep hoping. And walk forward, protected and prepared, into everything still ahead of you. Consider, before you fully close this message, taking one slow, deliberate breath, letting it mark the transition between everything you have just read and the rest of your day now waiting for you. Let that breath carry with it a quiet commitment to actually apply at least one thing from everything shared here today, rather than simply moving on unchanged. Archangel Michael says, that single breath, and the commitment it carries, matters more than any individual sentence written in this entire message. Words alone rarely change a life. Deliberate, consistent action, chosen and repeated over time, is what actually does. If this message reached you today, it reached you because you were ready to receive both its warnings and its encouragement. Walk forward now, protected, aware, and equipped for whatever comes next. Archangel Michael says, "Thank you for staying until the very last word today." That patience itself says something about how seriously you are taking your own growth, and that seriousness will serve you well in everything still ahead. God says, "Go now, alert and equipped, carrying every warning shared today as a tool for genuine protection, and every encouragement as a reminder of exactly how loved and how capable you already are." Archangel Michael says, that is everything for today. Stay alert, stay hopeful, and walk forward knowing you are genuinely seen, genuinely protected, and genuinely loved. Consider sharing this message with one more person before you go, someone specific who came to mind while reading through these warnings and encouragements, someone who might need exactly this reminder today. God says, this message is now truly complete. You are seen, you are protected, you are loved, and you are ready for whatever comes next. Archangel Michael says, walk gently, walk wisely, and walk forward, carrying everything you needed from today into all the days still ahead of you. God says, this message was sent just for you, exactly as it was written, exactly at this moment in your life. Trust it. Walk forward with it. Archangel Michael says, one final breath before you go. Let it settle everything you have just read, and let it mark the beginning of how you choose to live differently, starting today. God says, this is truly the final word for today. You are seen, you are protected, and you are ready. Archangel Michael says, thank you again for staying with this message until its true and final end. That patience is itself evidence of how seriously you are taking your own growth. Consider closing your eyes for just a moment before you go, letting everything shared here settle fully, before stepping back into the rest of your day carrying it forward with you. God says, go now, carrying both the warning and the encouragement into everything the rest of today still holds for you. Archangel Michael says, that is everything. Walk gently, walk wisely, and walk forward. God says, this message was truly sent just for you, exactly as it was written, exactly at this moment in your life.